Okay, can I welcome you all along to this delayed meeting of Finance and Resources, and delayed for understandable reasons given the importance of the scrutiny paper this morning. We may be pressed for time, but I certainly don't want equally to foreshorten discussion and debate, but I want to try and see if we can crack on as soon as possible. Be on the papers, Councillor Lane will be taking the revenue paper and also the Treasury paper. I'm conscious of again on time. Let's see how we go by the time we've completed there. But we actually do certainly need on the Fair Work statement, because that has to be published quite soon, and also on the Health and Social Care Partnership paper, because it's an important element of completing the leadership review. But anyway, first of all, I think most of you know, but just for the public, on the top table we have here Stuart McKenzie, Councillor Lane as Vice Convener, and also, as everyone knows, as Council Leader, Kirsten as Clerk, Lisa Simpson as Strategic Lead, as Head of Legal and Governance, and of course Thomas Glenn as our Chief Executive. Okay. Let's just turn to, first of all, Kirsten, do we have any apologies? And then we'll take a roll call.
Thanks, Convener. We have an apology from Councillor Duff with Councillor Allen substituting. Can I just check if we have Provost McDade online?
Yes, good afternoon, Kirsten.
Thank you. All other members are present in the Chambers, Convener.
Bailey Ahern online as well.
Okay, and I just welcome along Councillor Illingworth to his first meeting of Finance and Resources. Kirsten, by the way, also Karen Donaldson today is not feeling at her best, so she is coming in online as well if required. Kirsten, could we move to a roll call? Or if the only person then is actually Provost McDade and Chris Ahern are online. Okay, then we just proceed. Okay, next, are there any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any. Okay, we move on to next business. The next item, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any points arising, or can we agree those minutes? Agreed? Fine. Item 4 is the outstanding business statement. And as you can see, there were 3 items there completed. Does anyone have any comments to make on the outstanding business statement? So that's agreed. Okay. Right, we now move on to the first really substantive paper, and this is going to be taken by Councillor Grant Lane, and that is obviously the revenue budget paper. So I'm going to hand over to Grant. Grant?
Thanks very much, Convener, and I'd like to thank all the members for the quick turnaround today to facilitate this important meeting, and also officers who've attended this morning as well. So without further ado, I will ask Scott Walker, the Strategic Lead for Finance and Business Support, to introduce this revenue budget report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the second revenue monitor report for 23-24 and is based on the August ledger. At this time, we're projecting an overspend across the council of just under £1.6 million, and I'll take you through the main elements shortly. Since my last update, the projected overspend has increased by around £600,000. The main reason for this is the acknowledgement in the monitoring that we're unlikely to receive a share of the Tayside contract surplus in the current financial year, and I'll come back to that later. I need to stress that these projections are based on 5 months of actual data and will change. As has been the case in previous financial years, the committee will be updated as the year progresses. In section 5 of the report, we provide an update on service revenue budgets. But before I move into individual services, I need to advise the committee that these projections do not include the financial impact of the storms in October. We're still gathering the financial impact of the adverse weather, but initial estimates suggest additional costs to date of around about £1.2 million. The Council has activated the Bellwyn scheme, which is now in place for the remainder of the financial year. However, I do need to remind the committee that under the terms of the scheme, we are required to fund the first £798,000 of expenditure. At paragraph 5.8, we're seeking authority to bring forward payment of the real living wage from the 1st of April 2024 to the 1st of December 2023. If this proposal is accepted, 23 colleagues will benefit with an increase to £12 per hour. Turning to our service projections, Education and Children's Services are now projecting an underspend of £175,000. This is an improved position primarily due to additional staff slippage. However, whilst devolved school management budgets are currently on target, they are still experiencing challenges in achieving staff slippage. And currently, we're projecting a £100,000 underspend on the Pupil Equity Fund. Across the community service, we're now projecting a break-even position. There are movements across all functions in communities, which are summarised in the table at paragraph 5.15 and include staff slippage, updated income projections and additional costs. And in corporate and democratic services, we're projecting a net overspend of £127,000, which has arisen due to updated housing benefit projections and increased demand for crisis and community grants. In section 6, we provide an update on our corporate budgets, which includes the Health and Social Care Partnership and the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Section 7 provides an update on council tax collection, and based on collection data to the end of October, this income budget remains on target. The level of collection to date remains encouraging, but will be kept under review. Section 8 includes commentary on our ALIOs and the housing revenue account. Also within this section is an update on Tayside contracts. On Monday past, the Joint Committee were advised of a potential trading account variance of £3.2 million and staff cost pressures of around £2 million. Under the terms of the minute of agreement, this cost pressure of approximately £5.2 million falls to the 3 constituent councils. Our share of this is £2.1 million, and the report includes a proposal to fund this pressure from unearmarked reserves. The projections at Appendix 1 now also reflect that it is unlikely that we will receive the £550,000 budgeted from our share of Tayside contract surplus in the current financial year. Section 9 includes information on additional revenue support grant and other grants. Section 10 sets out several adjustments between budget headings that result in no change in the level of council spend. And Section 11 includes several proposals around the use of earmarked reserves, including climate change and local area partnerships, as well as some proposals to carry forward funding for previously approved projects. This section also includes a proposal to provide further financial support from unearmarked reserves to the Scottish Cranach Centre. In summary, on the basis of that the proposals within this report are accepted, our earmarked reserves are projected to reduce to £28.294 million, and our unearmarked reserves reduced to £14.189 million, or 3%. Finally, Vice Convener, the 23-24 SJC pay offer is currently being consulted on. There remains a risk that the final pay deal costs more than our budgeted provision, along with the Scottish Government funding, which could impact on both the current and future financial years. It is anticipated that the financial implications of the 23-24 pay negotiations will be included in the next revenue monitoring report. Colleagues and I are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report, Mr. Walker. And the first questions, I see they're beginning to come in now. The first one is from Councillor Rebick.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's related, it's just about Tayside contracts, and if I'm putting this very crassly, my apologies, but I think the summary is, instead of, we were expecting to receive £500,000 but instead now it's costing us £2 million. And if that's the case, I'm slightly baffled as to why we, as in Perth and Kinross Council, are liable for 40% of that loss.
Okay, I can start off on that, being on the board of Tayside Contracts and being involved in this discussion quite recently. A lot of it's due to inflationary pressures, both food and wage pressures. However, I think we need to look into it further because it's not sustainable. The fact that we have to pay 40% of the 5.2 million is related because we spent more money than other groups, which is, to me, is a crazy way of looking at things. I think we have to revisit the memorandum of understanding or the minute of agreement that the more you spend and put into a company, the bigger the loss you take, especially if you're spending the money in the profit-making side of the business. So we spent 45% of Tayside Contracts revenue income came from Perth and Kinross Council, and they made a profit on that side. We put 45% in, but the way that the minute of agreement works, that at the moment, if there's a loss, the more you spend, the more you have to contribute. So I don't know if Scott or Fraser want to come in on that.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, just really to clarify that the minute of agreement basically divvies out any surplus or deficit based on turnover of the business in the previous year. So that's what the minute of agreement states, and that's what we have at the moment.
Thank you both.
Thanks. The minute of agreement was signed in 1996 and the world's moved on a long way since then, so I think it has to be revisited. Thanks. I'll take Councillor Shires next before we come to your second question.
I kind of incorporated both my questions into the one, so thank you.
Okay, thanks. Caroline.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question's at 5.13, and it's about the section that's devolved school management scheme, but it talks about staff slippage targets. I wonder if we could have a bit more detail around that, and if they're perhaps proving to be unrealistic in what can be delivered by schools.
Thank you. I think I'll ask Sheena Devlin if she's here, or who's the representative. Greg Bolanton, please. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Shires, we have a 4% slippage target across education and children's services, which is obviously consistent with the council. What we're seeing across our schools is that generally early years and their special sector are doing okay with regard to the slippage target. We are facing challenges certainly across the primary sector, and also in some schools in our secondary school, in some of our secondary schools, basically because we obviously need to maintain our teacher numbers, so we don't have any opportunities for any slippage on any of our teachers. So it is pressing, but overall, as a service, as you know, we're slightly underspent, but it is challenging in the current year, yes.
Caroline, is that okay? Can I come back to Caroline after everybody else? So next up, we have Deputy Provost Andrew Barrett.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. My question relates to 7.7 on non-domestic rates. I'm conscious that we act as a collection agency for non-domestic rates, but it is worrying to see that our collection at the 31st of October this year was only marginally short of 52%, whereas previously in last year it was 63%. Is there a rationale or a particular reason for that? Thanks.
I think we'll go to Scott Walker, please.
Yep, thanks, Vice Convener. So there was delays this year in getting software upgrades, so we're sort of behind the curve in terms of our recovery processes, and we anticipate it will catch up throughout this financial year.
Thanks. Next questions, Councillor Alan Keith.
Thank you, Convener. Can somebody explain to me what sort of costs are covered by the Bellwin scheme? Thank you.
Barbara Renton. Scott Walker.
Okay, thank you. So it's really the immediate response to an event. So it's about keeping communities connected. It's about the immediate response in terms of welfare. It's not capital. It's not the longer term costs. And as I said earlier on, actually the first £798,000 falls to the council because it's expected that that's why we hold reserves. But I'm very happy to share the guidance which goes into more detail if that would be useful.
Thanks. Are you happy with that, Keith? Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Vice Chair. I really wanted to return to the Teesside contracts issue and the questions that Councillor Rebick raised and the comments that you made. I wanted to ask, is there anybody from Teesside contracts here to answer questions from this committee? I don't think so. Okay.
I don't believe there is, Councillor Barrett, unless Fraser wants to step into the breach. But I think definitely moving forward, we're going to have to ask our scrutiny committee to bring Tayside contracts and have some way of challenging within this chamber.
Thanks, convener. I think, or vice convener. I think if any of our other partners were experiencing a financial pressure of 5.2 million that was going to sting us for 2.1 million, then we'd expect that their financial controller and chief executive would be here to describe their mitigation action plan and how they were going to try and contain costs given the scale of it. I'm also concerned about what you say, given that the bulk of our spend is with the profit generating wing of Tayside contracts. We are picking up the lion's share of the loss making side of their business, which I understand is the catering side of the business. And it seems a completely unsustainable situation that Perth and Kinross Council is effectively subsidising the cost of school meals in Angus and Dundee, and that has to be brought to a halt immediately, I would have said. So I think there is an urgent need to review the memorandum of understanding, or whatever they call it, as well as the governance arrangements in Tayside contracts.
I thoroughly agree with you. I was at Tayside Contracts Joint Committee earlier this week and asked for scrutiny committee to be set up within the organisation. The vote was 187, but the memorandum of understanding says we don't have to do that because you need 75% of the available votes before you can pass any scrutiny. So yes, I share your frustration. And the memorandum of understanding, as I said, was written in 1996. And it maybe worked up to the last 4 years, but 4 years of having a loss, the way that's set now is spend less money, lose less money, which makes the harder for Tayside contracts to work moving forward. So I think we should all be pressing to have a look at the memorandum of understanding. Thank you. Back to Caroline. Councillor Shars.
Thank you. My second question was at 5.14 about the pupil equity funding. It's a bit, PEF's been in operation now for quite a long time, and I would have thought that schools would have been more sort of on the ball about their plans on how to make the most of the budget that they manage for it. So it was to get a bit of an understanding about how that's all operating. I also thought that schools have been instructed to use this year's PEF by 31st of March was maybe a bit revealing language about, perhaps that it's just not been given the focus and priority that it could be, and just to get a bit of an understanding around all of that. Thank you.
Thanks. My reading of the figures, and I could be wrong, it's be under 5% that hasn't been spent, so quite a large 95% of it has been spent, but I'll go to Greg Boland.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, council shares, there's in recent years there has been a significantly higher figure. We're working obviously with the schools and they are obviously spending their money. Now we know have the money for a number of years. We are encouraging them to spend, but a lot of the schools do have contracts with certainly their teaching staff that run from April to June. So some of it is just planned expenditure, but the figure of 100,000 is significantly less than in previous years.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, Keith.
Thank you, Convener. Report back here. At 6.3, it talks about an overspend of 2.465 million, which is set out in Appendix 3. Overall projected overspend of 1.059 million relates to social care. Are Perth and Kinross Council liable for any social care overspend at the end of the financial year?
Mr. Walker, please.
Yep, so based on the current projections, the Health and Social Care Partnership can cover this overspend within their own reserves. So presently, there is no call on Perth and Kinross Council.
Thank you. Councillor Shire, Caroline.
Thank you. My final question was at 11.15 about the Scottish Crannog Centre, a brilliant project that I'm sure we all want to get behind. And it was just to ask if they're likely to come forward with, or if we're expecting any further requests for funding, or if that will be the kind of conclusion of our involvement.
I think the project's pretty well moved forward, but I'll go to Scott Walker, because you can never say never. Somebody's going to come back for something else. The way inflation and projects are running. So, Scott.
Yeah, I don't know if Stephen Crawford or Fiona Roberts are on a call, but that's pretty much the allocation, the full allocation made. The committee has previously approved the £210,000, so we're just short of that. I don't know if colleagues are on the call.
I can.
Okay, Stephen.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for the question. I can confirm the project's complete this month, and this final request was based on the final account. And it's been confirmed to me that they will be making no further requests for supporting the project.
Thanks. There's a whole raft of other questions come in, so I'll go to Colin Stewart, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. I was going to ask something about 11.6, but actually I think I want to follow up on the Tayside contracts point. Am I to understand correctly that this council wrote to Tayside contracts suggesting that they had a scrutiny committee set up? The vote was won to set up the scrutiny committee. But then there's something in the memorandum of understanding which means that you need 75% rather than a simple majority. But they have therefore, as an organisation, ignored the request of this council that they set up scrutiny.
To be fair, it was the elected members who are of the three councils who are the who make the vote, who decide the vote and decided that they thought there was enough scrutiny. It wasn't my view at all, and they saw no harm in looking at it further when we're in this financial position. But the officer's recommendation from Tayside Contracts was that they didn't see the need at this moment to bring forward any other scrutiny. Apart from the Tayside Joint Committee.
Thanks.
Councillor McEwen.
I don't need to answer my question anymore. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thomas, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Vice Convener.
Sorry, I don't know if you can still hear me. Apologies for that. No, I thought it important just to come in on the back of the Tayside contracts conversation, because clearly there are questions that this council has presented in terms of its confidence in the level of scrutiny being carried out by the joint committee. So we spoke after Monday's decision because we understood it was a binding decision at that point, and it was only after the event that the clerk came back to advise of the 75% majority for all votes on all matters by Tayside committee. So this wasn't specific to the establishment of the scrutiny committee. So we met with the chair, who's currently our own Councillor Williamson, for a discussion yesterday, and we will take this matter up with the governance arrangements for the Tayside Contracts Joint Committee, and did recommend there were options for us, because we could be in a situation where we look to resurrect this and ask for it to be reconsidered, but if it fails to meet the 75%, again, we could be looking to bring all scrutiny items back to the full joint committee, which on the face of that feels like an ineffective way to carry out your scrutiny. There may be an option, which we discussed yesterday, to look at extending the remit of one of the existing subcommittees that's in place. So there is that conversation going on, and we will revert back to our representatives on the joint committee just to update them as soon as we can.
Thanks, Thomas. Bailey.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead with one question because there's a lot in the queue. Again, on the theme of Tayside contracts, I understand that in a Is that better? We're better. Cool. Thank you. So I understand that in a So I understand that in a good year, the constituent local authorities, ourselves included, take the surplus from Tayside contracts as a profit. To what extent have we benefited from that arrangement over the past number of years? And also furthermore, and that will help us to put the current losses into context. And then furthermore, I know that Tayside Contracts is allowed to manage a reserves policy. Have Tayside Contracts dipped into their reserve before declaring this loss that we have to meet potentially this fiscal year? Thank you.
Thanks. If my memory serves me right, I think there's been £31 million of distributable surplus in the 27 years of Tayside contracts. But you've got to remember the way that a surplus is declared. If we give them 6 million this year, the surplus will be 800,000, even though the operating loss is 5.2. It doesn't take into, it doesn't record the extra money that you have to put in year before you get surplus. So that 31 million is a contentious figure. So, but on the second part of your question about reserves, I'll defer to somebody. Yeah. Fraser Gross.
Thank you, Convener. Regarding the reserves position, I need to double check, but they were extremely low in terms of the overall position, which wouldn't be able to mitigate or accommodate any of what we're seeing here. But we can double check that and come back. Have you got a figure, Scott? All right.
Scott, please.
Yeah, just to come back to the question, in terms of the first part of the question, thank you for the heads up on this one. We did have a look back. Over the last 16 years, the Perth and Kinross Council has benefited to the tune of £7.4 million. However, as the Vice Convener said, the last 3 or 4 years has been propped up by significant contributions from Perth and Kinross Council. You've been asked to apply £2.1 million today. It was £1 million back in March, etc. So we need to set that alongside each other. In terms of reserves, they do keep a minimal amount of reserves because they do try and maximise the amount they have returned to the councils. I can remember a couple of years ago where they kept a little bit back for a specific purpose. I think it was around about equal pay, etc. But they really do operate with a minimum level of reserves.
Thanks. Councillor Cuthbert, Dave.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I've got 3 questions, all related to Tayside contracts. can I make them one after another because they're all quite sort of, they roll one into the other?
Yes, because I'm losing track of who's asking which question, 2 or 3, so that'll help me as well. On you go.
Okay, thank you. The first question is on section 5.9 on page 13. It shows that the Education and Children's Services have a catering services underspend of 274,000. I'm a bit confused because the school meal uptake is going up, and the reason Tayside contracts, one of the biggest reasons for their loss, is the inflation in food. So is it to do with the way that the contract's done?
Thanks. I think I'll be Greg Boland because I don't think Andy Cook's on the call.
Thanks, Convener. And Councillor Cuthbert, yes, with regard to that's our budgeted income and expenditure for the school meal service. I think what's not been applied, and which is part of the overspend, which we're talking about just now, is in relation to obviously the pay award, which is still to be formalised, and also the food inflation. So those two factors are above the current kind of budget levels of income expenditure. So it's in addition to what is reflected with regard to education and children's services, school meal service as a standalone. If that makes sense, I'm happy to tease it out more if that's not clear.
Mr. Cuthbert. Second question.
Thank you. Yeah, the second question relates to clause 20 of the minute of agreement. That's what it's called. This says that the financial affairs of the joint committee shall be set up so as to ensure a trading organisation is maintained as required in terms of the relevant legislation, which shall meet internally all revenue expenditure through income generated from its trading activities in accordance with the functions delegated to it. Now, my view on this is that what's happening is that Tayside contracts are not able to invoice for the costs of the food they're providing. So in effect, we're in breach of clause 20. So whilst we might be in breach for the 75% clause, this says to me that there needs to be an urgent review of how the actual invoicing is done. So I'm just asking, is my interpretation of that correct?
That's not one that I will try and answer for sure. I don't know if the head of legal, Lisa Simpson, is. I don't see anyone, but I can assure you, you will get an answer back in a short time. Okay.
If I can just come back on that, I think it's critical that we look at this because this is what fundamentally is causing the overspend at Tayside contracts, because they're not able to pass on the cost of inflation. It's worked fine in previous years because we've been low inflation, but now in a period of high inflation, that's what's causing this problem. If I may move on to my third question, the other issue that they've got is the pay claims that they're getting. And in essence, Tayside contracts are being hit really hard because most of their employees are in the lower price pay brackets, and therefore it's a much higher impact on them than anyone else. We've been told as a committee, we've been told that we can actually get that back from the Scottish Government and that will be paid to the council. So what I'm trying to find out is where that money is going and why we're taking the repayment to Tayside contract from unearmarked reserves when it should be coming from the Scottish Government money that's been put forward.
I'm looking at a reluctant Scott Walker here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question. The first thing to say is that the pay award is not funded in entirety by the Scottish Government. As a council, we have put aside 3% and we're hoping that funding will be forthcoming. The other thing is that the funding from the Scottish Government is being recycled across the local government funding block. We don't have the detail of how that has been allocated yet. We're hoping that will come out in the next few weeks. Once we have more information, hopefully be able to pass that on. But right now, we are in the dark a little bit.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Just to suggest that when we know that figure, that's offset against the money that we're having to pay so that it's clear where it's coming from and we're not dipping into earmarked reserves.
Well, we can update you once all the unknowns become knowns. I'll go to People not requiring the Provost. Xander, please.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I want to pick up on the one of my questions has already been answered, so I don't have to answer that one. I want to pick up on TSA contracts as well, but slightly different angle. When the previous administration decided to approve the central production unit model, some of us raised concerns about the fact that there was going to be a lot of food being moved around by vehicles, and the focus at that point was around the carbon emissions of it. However, since then, fuel inflation has been a significant part of inflationary pressures in the UK, and one assumes on Tayside contracts, and particularly on this model of delivery. So my question is, do we understand what level of the pressures around food school meals is, what amount of that component is fuel related costs that are now being borne by Tayside contracts, which wouldn't have been previously under the previous model because the suppliers were bearing those costs. So I'm wondering if we have a percentage figure on that, and whether it is now perhaps being outweighed, and the cost is outweighing any potential saving we ever were going to get.
I can certainly ask if an officer knows. I very much doubt it, because as a member of the Joint Committee, we're not given the amount of detail even when we request it. So I'll ask, do any officers know the... Well, Fraser's got his hand up there, so... And there's the hospital pass. Greg.
Thanks, Convener. All I was going to say, similar to yourself, that I don't have that to hand, that specific detail, but obviously, as you would expect, we're having a number of meetings with Tayside contracts, scrutinise the financial performance of the current year. So we'll pick up on that specific request from the Provost and ensure we have that for the further reporting in the future.
Can I get a written answer to that, Vice Convener, once we have an answer from Tayside contracts, please?
Yes, can get that to you. And Senior on Tayside contracts, I'll let you ask your second question now as well, please.
Thank you. I want to understand my understanding of the founding document, which has now escaped me, is that if we can't renegotiate that, and it is going to continue putting significant financial pressures on the council, I want clarity that my understanding is we would have to indicate our intention to leave by the 30th of June, and that wouldn't take place until the following year. So effectively, that would be the 30th of June 24. We'd have to indicate it, and we wouldn't leave until, I think, something like 31st of March 25 if we were unable to renegotiate the memorandum. Is that correct?
Lisa? Yep, that's the head of legal and governance has agreed with your summation, Provost.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Barrett, Peter, for his second question.
Thank you, and it relates to page 37 of the pack, appendix 4, and the housing revenue account. The item second from the bottom is saying that there's a £344,000 shortfall to the HRA due to the reduced number of new builds. I just wondered, that appears by my kind of rough arithmetic to be something like 120 houses, which would seem like an awfully large proportion of our year's build for us not to be achieving. I just wanted to know, is that the sort of scale of reduced house building, or is there another reason for it, and is there specific developments that were in jeopardy?
If I could sort of look at my colleague Stephen Coyle, who is, sort of much more au fait with the housing revenue account. I don't believe it's 120 houses, Councillor Barrett, but we will need to check the exact figures and come back to you. But what I can reassure elected members is that we have recently, sort of been interviewing for affordable housing officers to get our programme very much back on track in terms of new build, and the new team leader who has been appointed there as well has quite a plan, as you would expect, based on the SHIP, to take that forward. In terms of that delay, we've got delays in commencement of the developments that we have, and we're also increasing, but to compensate for that, we're increasing the purchase of buybacks. But we'll come back to you with an exact figure. Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate the information, but I think there's maybe also an issue that we need to consider when setting next year's HRA, that we go into it with a realistic construction programme. So,
thanks, Peter. Councillor, Bailey, and then I'll come to you, Keith.
Thank you. This one's about the Crannog Centre. Looking at the amount of funding we've put there now in the round, it's pretty close to £250,000 of public funding there. Does that entitle us to nominate anyone onto their board of trustees or similar, or is there any other arrangement in terms of following the public pound? I note that sometimes when we give grants much smaller than that, we get to nominate someone onto a board, or is it different in this case because of it being capital funding? Just wondering how we are monitoring that significant investment that's gone in there. Thank you.
That's a reasonable question, and I don't know who would wish to answer that one.
Vice Convener, I can answer the question if you like.
That sounds fair enough.
Both Councillor Duff and Councillor Bailey Williamson, are on the board of Crannog Centre. Not as council nominees, I don't think, but they are both on the board. So we're quite well represented as it is.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Keith.
Thank you, Vice Convener. And forgive me if I'm catching up here and I've missed this, so my apologies maybe to Scott in advance, but at 8.8 it talks about a resulting and potential cost pressure of approximately 2.1 million. And then further down at 8.13 it talks about the unlikely arrival of £550,000 from Tayside contracts. Does that make the full cost pressure 2.65 million, or is it just 2.1 million?
No, you're correct. So £2.1 million from unearmarked reserves to bolster our budgets, and £500,000 of non-achieved income. So £2.6 million pressure on the council.
My final question was just in appendix 11.14, 11.15. It talks about £115,000 for the Scottish Crannog Centre, and it says it's in appendix 6, but I don't see it there.
Scott.
Yeah, thanks. So you don't see it explicitly because we're funding it from unearmarked reserves. So if I could take you to the bottom of appendix 6, you will see a figure of £2.383 million. It's in there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. I'll go back to what I was going to ask originally, which is on 11.6 and the drawdown from earmarked reserves of balances held for specific previously approved purposes. I think local action partnerships is clear, and climate change is clear. I'm just curious what the 96,000 drawdown from the project feasibility fund is for.
Do we have a volunteer from officers? Fraser.
It's me, apparently. So I think this was funding that was set aside. It was £150,000, if I recall correctly. Pretty much to do what it says in the tin here, which is to consider, to put resource forward towards dealing with feasibility for in particular capital projects, which couldn't otherwise be charged to capital. So if you like, it's the pump priming of a staffing resource or a consultancy resource in order to take projects through the business case development stage.
And if I can come in, it's specifically for this one, it's for the Eco Innovation Park.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any more questions, so I will move the report. It's good to see that everybody isn't too tired from their morning and early afternoon, that they still want to debate, which is really impressive. So, councillors, this is the second revenue monitoring update for the current financial year. Scott Walker has already provided us with comprehensive commentary on the contents of this report. The report sets out a projected overspend of just under 1.6 million. As is the case with every projection we receive, the position will be kept under review, and we will review further updates throughout the financial year. In terms of the contents of the report, I would like to draw the committee's attention to several matters. I welcome the proposal to bring forward payment of the real living wage to the 1st December 2023, benefiting around 23 of our lowest paid staff. And whilst I accept that Tayside contracts are not immune from inflationary pressures facing individuals and businesses in this cost of living crisis, and that they need to be provided additional financial support, I have to say that this is the 4th year in a row that we've had to provide additional support, and this is clearly not sustainable. That's why I called for increased scrutiny of Tayside contracts at the last meeting of the Joint Committee, and whilst this successfully in this House our chamber would have won a vote, it didn't because of the minute of agreement regulations. But we will be looking along with the Chief Executive and others to find another way of scrutinising what is going on within Tayside contracts. Finally, I welcome the proposal to draw down reserves to support our climate change agenda and also to support the Scottish Crannog Centre. Before I formally move this report, I want to take the opportunity to respond to comments made at this morning's Scrutiny and Performance Committee and was raised at the residents' meeting last Wednesday. Through Councillor Stewart and Bailey, the committee unanimously called for an increased investment in community resilience across the whole of Perth and Kinross, and I think we can all agree to this. That's why I want to reallocate £175,000 of funding from our budget to help our communities be prepared for future weather events, no matter where they occur. This will help finance resilience groups, both existing and new, and help with training and provide them with the instruments that they need to work together, as they've shown to be very successful in some areas of the local authority. As ever, I want to place on record my thanks to the Chief Executive and staff across the whole of the Council for their continued efforts, particularly those involved in the weather events during October. Happy to move this report.
Vice Convener, happy to second.
Do we want to go to comments, please? Councillor Stewart Collin.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. Thank you. I would like to reflect or amplify your comments about Tayside contracts. I recall that we had written as a council specifically to Tayside contracts asking for a scrutiny function to be instigated at them at the Joint Committee, and I'm disappointed that the Joint or that there was not a sufficient upswell of opinion in response to a formal request from one of the founding partners of Tayside Contracts that was favourable towards our concerns regarding scrutiny. Certainly, I had spoken to the head of legal and governance previously about whether or not it would be appropriate to bring Tayside Contracts to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee here, and certainly we can continue. And it may be that it's more appropriate to bring them to Finance and Resources directly, but I think it would be a useful discussion to pick up again. So fully support you on that. On the issue of the resilience funding, following the August 2021 report to Environment and Infrastructure Committee on the flooding events of August 2020, I'd inserted a line in the next budget, which was in February, March 22, requesting £30,000 of funding to support ALITH in particular, because ALITH has repeatedly over recent years been very badly hit. When the resilience team there, and I've said this to them, when the resilience team there came to me with a shopping list which included training and buying brand new pumps and generators, I thought, this is expensive, and do we really need it? But the events of last month have absolutely proved that we do. They were out there, they were pumping, they were using the pumps to pump out people's houses and driveways to avert flooding incidents. But they had also taken the initiative to connect with neighbouring resilience groups in Rattray in particular, and Rattray and Meagle and Ardler in particular. And I think that shows the value of us providing support to communities who will then make connections and provide mutual aid one community from one community to another. That's absolutely a model that I think that we want to encourage to be replicated across Perth and Kinross. And so that's why we made a recommendation from our curtailed meeting. We still have more to do in terms of reviewing, and more to do in terms of bringing forward recommendations from the Scrutiny and Performance Committee in terms of flooding. But that's why we made it one of our key additional recommendations this morning. I fully support you in bringing that forward this afternoon. Thank you very much, Vice Convener.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work of your committee. I think it's the time is now. The next weather event could happen at any time, so we'll have to move on this quickly instead of waiting to come forward with it in our budget proposals in February. So thank you. Councillor Revitt.
Thanks again, Vice Convener. It was just a brief comment about Pupil Equity Fund, and I think Councillor Sharrs is entirely right to question any underspends in any given year. Pupil Equity Fund makes a huge difference in young people's lives, but it is intended for that cohort in that particular year. It is intended to plug the gap, the attainment gap of those pupils. So she's quite right to ask that question. I do believe that the part of the underspend is around the differences chronologically with the fiscal calendar and the academic calendar, and also sometimes that head teachers are doing good advanced planning in terms of their staffing. However, as discussed at Lennon Families very recently, Pupil Equity Fund does make a huge difference in the lives of our young learners, and I believe it's appropriate here that we commend the imaginative and important transformational efforts that our head teachers and senior leaders in the school are making in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Provost McDade, Xander.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Very much echo what's been said about that it's disappointing about the additional scrutiny, and I'm glad to hear that yourself and the Chief Executive and others will be continuing to press that matter. And I think there will need to be greater accountability through scrutiny and performance and finance and resources committees of this council to ensure that we are getting good value for money out of it, and also seeking to renegotiate that memorandum. Very much wanted to actually talk about the Crannog Centre, which is obviously in my ward, and that of Councillor Duff, who can't be here with us today, and Councillor Williamson. And the fact that this is a really important resource, not just for our community locally, but is an internationally and nationally culturally important centre as one of its kind here in Scotland, and that it is really important for that cultural heritage of our community. And also just to support your push for additional community flooding support, and I know that has worked very well in the recent times in Aberfeldy and in Blair Athol, where both those communities, with the support of the council, had success.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, Peter.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to echo the comments made by the Provost regarding the Cranach Centre. I had hoped to see the Cranach Centre in its new guise, but unfortunately, due to a family medical emergency before the minibus got out of Perth, I had to return and head towards Ninewells. But is really pleased that this council is able to support such an important heritage and tourist asset in our community. I also want to echo your comments regarding the implementation or the early implementation of the real living wage for members of our staff who are on the lowest wage. I think, you know, following previous years where this has been done through motions put forward, I think, by Councillor Bailey and others, it is really good to see the streamlined process in ensuring that, you know, this matter is considered either at this meeting or a meeting of full council before Christmas and coming to such a positive conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you. I think similarly on the living wage, I very warmly welcome the fact that the impact of that early payment is coming forward each year automatically, so we're able to assess it in this wonderful non-political way. I'm happy that we're taking such a progressive stance on this, and also note that later in the papers we're talking about giving the modern apprentices that pay level as well, which is obviously something I welcome, assuming we get to that stage in the proceedings. We heard on the flooding, we heard very moving testimony this morning about the impact of flooding in our area. I personally visited a number of people whose houses suffered flooding in Invergowrie, and it's not an experience I'd wish on anyone. Therefore, I'm very grateful to the administration for allocating these additional monies for helping those communities to organise during the flooding events. And I've already put out a call for volunteers in Invergowrie, and that availability of the flooding money will help make that all the more tangible. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is not the administration alone, it's the working together of everybody who attended the meeting and spoke to their communities. I think should take the credit for the position we're able to go to today to allocate these monies today. Thank you. Councillor Shire.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'd reiterate the comments that Councillor Ribbick made about pupil equity funding and the difference that it makes in schools, and the fact that the budget sits with the head teachers so they can make the decisions about what's best for their particular school community. On the resilience funding, thank you very much. I know that Blairgowrie and Rattray, this will be very warmly welcomed, and echoing Councillor Stewart's comments about the work that's been done to create I can't remember what they call themselves, Strathmore resilience team, where they can share the resources and make sure that there's nothing sitting in a shed somewhere that could be being used in another community if they can get around without the flooding. And on the Tayside contract situation, I was at the meeting on Monday. I have sat on Tayside contracts for the best part of the 16 years that I've been a councillor, and I would welcome a review of the minute of agreement. I think it is out of date. However, I would like to just place on record that I did not feel that Mr McNamara was anything but open about the fact that he would welcome the opportunity to come to scrutiny and performance here at Perth and Kinross. He talked about the attendance that he makes at Dundee City Council and at Angus Council, and I think we should invite him to come along as soon as possible to give the whole and complete picture of the operation of that organisation, because I think you do have to look at things over a longer period of time, and Tayside Contracts hasn't, as we've heard, it hasn't always made losses, and not the whole picture about the food inflation, etc., perhaps needs to be dug into a bit more in a bit more detail, and particularly about when is a free meal a free meal. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellingworth, David. Thank you. I'd like to make two comments. First of all, I'd like to thank the convener for his welcome this afternoon. And I'd also like to thank Committee Services for putting full descriptions on all the appendices on the agenda. Both of those are very helpful, and thank you for that. With regards to the central processing unit, that was a thing the last administration put in to save £400,000 a year, to deliver the same meals and save £400,000 a year. And I note that in the run-up to the last council elections, the SNP promised to review this situation, but there's no sign of that review taking place at the moment. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, there has been an internal review going on, and unfortunately the scorched earth policy is making it kind of difficult to go back to what was there before. But thank you for your comment, and it'd be interesting to see if it is saving £400,000 a year. It doesn't look like it at the moment. So thank you. And on that note, can we agree the report? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Convener. We now move on to the report on the capital budget and also the housing investment programme, both for the same periods, 2023 to 2028. And could I ask Stuart Mackenzie as Head of Finance to introduce the report? Stuart.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. And I do intend to be brief. I'm conscious of the lateness of the hour. This report provides an update on progress of the Council's approved capital budget and housing investment programme based upon expenditure at the end of September. Section 5 in Appendix 1 set out the resourcing of the budget, with gross expenditure in the General Fund programme to 27-28, currently estimated at approximately £623.5 million. This is a net increase of £334,000 over the position reported in September and reflects the receipt of £199,000 of Scottish Government capital funding from the Community Bus Fund and a net £102,000 of additional proposed investment in relation to waste management. The Council's capital borrowing requirement in 2023-24 is currently estimated at £146.7 million, a net reduction of £5.6 million, reflecting the rephasing of capital into future years as described within the report and summarised in the table at 5.8. Section 6 in Appendix 2 detail progress of the General Fund programme to date, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. Net expenditure at the 30th of September was approximately £67 million. This is £30 million more than the equivalent position last year, reflecting the current level of expenditure on major projects. The report also notes that construction inflation, while still a factor, does appear to be reducing. Proposed adjustments to the programme include the acceleration of refurbishment works to Perth Academy, the reprofiling of the budget for Perth High School replacement, and the rephasing of planned expenditure on the bridge refurbishment, road safety, cemetery extension, and vehicle replacement programmes, and a new traveller site project. Additional investment of £173,000 is also proposed to introduce twin streams recycling for commercial waste. And Appendix 4 to the report provides members with a progress update on significant General Fund capital projects. Section 7 and Appendix 3 to the report detail progress of the housing investment programme. The total 5-year housing programme remains unchanged at £92.2 million, with net expenditure in the current year to the 30th of September amounting to approximately £8.8 million. The report recommends adjustments to the programme, including the reallocation of the new build budget in 2023-24, with £7 million rephased into 2027-28 to be drawn down as projects progress. It is also proposed to accelerate £1.6 million from future years' budgets into the current year, primarily to support additional investment in the triple glazing programme. Subject to the approval of the adjustments set out within the report, projected outturn expenditure on the General Fund programme at the end of this year is currently estimated at £174.3 million, or 98% of the budget approved in April. At the end of September, £67 million of 38% of his projected expenditure had been incurred. The projected outturn position for the housing investment programme is estimated at £22.2 million, or 109% of the budget approved in April. This is being balanced against reductions in planned expenditure in future years of the housing programme. At the end of September, £8.8 million, or 40% of his projected expenditure, had been incurred. Colleagues now happy to take questions. Convener.
Do we have any questions? I'll call first of all Councillor Rebick, and he has 2 questions, but I'll take the first one just now.
Thank you very much, Convener. It's really just a question about the Perth Eco Innovation Park and the Perth West project. We know that Perth's the only city not to have received any levelling up money from the UK government. I'm just wondering if that will affect our ability to deliver what could be a vital economic project for our area.
Councillor Lane.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, and yes, it will obviously affect our ability to deliver it, and the fact that we will have to fund the project ourselves to get it up and running. It's a vital cog to driving forward the economy and making job prospects more attractive for people living in Perth and Kinross. So it was very disappointing. I wrote a letter to, I was invited to write a letter to the Minister and Jacob Young, and I wrote last week, and I had it was signed with other parliamentarians of various parties, which was good, but unfortunately the decision came out on Monday, and it was a different way of delivering the funding. It was, I'll not say any more about how it was delivered differently, but I've spoken to the leader of the Conservative group on yesterday, and we'll hopefully work together to see if we can come up with some influence to get help to fund that important project.
Thank you. It does seem a bit frustrating, certainly, but thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Rebick for his second question. Councillor Allen, and then followed by Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. 5.5, it talks about the Scottish Government announcing details of a community bus fund for £199,000. Then goes on to say the grant has been added to the general capital grant, and while specific proposals are developed, is it likely that that money could disappear?
I think I'll go to Stuart first of all on that, and if anyone, other officers want to come in. Fraser, okay.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, great work by the public transport team securing the funding. As you say, it's been passed over as general capital grant, but I think the situation here presented is such that we have it identified separately for specific schemes as and when they're brought forward. The team are working with existing community transport groups, but also through a new public transport forum that the team have set up to bring forward proposals. So good news, and hopefully we can get some good initiatives up and running.
Okay, then I shall move to Bailey.
Thank you. My question is on 7.4 about the acceleration of the monies for council house buybacks. So obviously I warmly welcome that, but my question is actually about a quite specific case. So on the one hand, we hear in the media about impoverished buy-to-let landlords who might want to dispose of some of their portfolios, and on the other hand, we want to buy more council homes. Is there a way that the council can facilitate continuation of tenancy for the occupants of those homes if we decide to buy that back into our stock, so that the buy-to-let landlord doesn't find themselves having to evict the tenants in order that we can make it into a council house and then find different tenants? Thank you.
Right, which officer would like to answer? Barbara. Okay, I shall revert back to Councillor Rebick for his second question, and then I'll come to Councillor Allen.
Thanks again, convener. I think I know the answer to this one, but just to confirm and excuse my economic illiteracy, but I think £5 million has been rephased from one year to another in terms of Perth High School development. And I think it says it in the paper, but this doesn't change the completion date. We're still expected to complete it by August 25, I think, but just for reassurance, which you're already nodding your head and giving me. So thank you very much.
Anyone want to come back? Okay.
Thank you, convener. 6.3.3, it talks about asset management for bridges. And nearly £2 million has been removed from 23-24. Over the next 3 years, we've taken out £665,000. What happened to the 1.3 million?
If I can answer that question, it's not a removal from the budget, it's a rephasing of the budget across a number of years, just to make sure that the funding available is in the year that we are going to deliver the project.
If I can also add comment, Councillor Allen, there is apologies for this, there's an erratum in the report. There's a figure of £1.332 million missing from 2027-28. And that would have illustrated the point that Barbara was making. I'm quite disappointed about that, but unfortunately it's there. So sorry, apologies for that to the committee.
I'm not sure if it's my naivety in missing some of the things, but that's great. Thank you. Can I just ask my last one? It's very simple.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
At 6.3,
Councillor Stewart.
yeah, at 6.3.5, which is just 2 sections down, it talks about the £411,000 for play areas improvement strategy. We've got, it says here that the majority, £403,000, will be allocated to be spent on play park equipment within neighbourhood parks over the next 2 years. Does that mean there'll be no spend at all in the third year?
I don't think on play areas where Andy Clegg may not be online. Could I ask communities at probably Fraser Cross here?
I think Caroline France or Stephen Coyle might be able to answer that question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for your question. That refers specifically to the grant that we received from the Scottish Government. So we do have the Council's core funding, so there will be funds spent across parks, but that's just in relation to the phasing of the grant that was received from the Scottish Government.
I also see Greg Boland, you're wanting to come in. You're going to respond. It's only just come up on my screen. Greg?
No, sorry, convener, that was in relation to Perth High, but that's been answered now, so thank you.
Okay, right, okay. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. It's in relation to 6.3.7. It's about rephasing of £175,000 budget for pedestrian crossings to later years. But that's following a review of traffic and road safety staff capacity. But in the budget this year, we increased the capacity in that team. So should we not be bringing these things forward rather than rephasing them to later years?
Who wants to respond on this, Barbara?
So we have increased the capacity. We also, that team picks up a number of road safety issues. We are also the beneficiaries of quite a significant amount of cycling, walking, safer streets grant as well. And the clear direction that we've given to our staff is we spend that money because that is time limited, so that there is plenty of work ongoing in that area. And we have increased the capacity. It's just the ability to get through all of that. But there is a clear focus on addressing the pedestrian crossings near schools as well, so that we can support any future approach to the budget there too.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, I appreciate that we have a list of 900 road safety projects and it's a lot to get through. But I am concerned that we focus on the cycling, walking, safer streets projects, which are not identified as council priorities, over the priorities that our communities and elected members identify.
Okay, I think that's more a comment than a question. I don't see any further questions, so I'm now going to move the report. I think the Head of Finance, Stuart Mackenzie, has given us a detailed commentary on the contents of the Capital Monitoring Report. But in some ways, if you look at the last Capital Monitoring Report, there hasn't been huge changes. There's been really an overall, in totality, a few minor movements here. There's also been a number of phasings which have gone one way and another way. But I actually do think, in general, this is a success story. It means that we are in Perth and Kinross getting on with delivering nearly 624 million of investment across Perth and Kinross, across our communities. But even if we've not received any funding yet from the Levelling Up Fund, which I think was meant to be largely to replace European funding, this investment is investment that's going to enhance our schools, our roads, our bridges, our buildings, and also other infrastructure across Perth and Kinross. I want to draw your attention to Appendix 2. I think that shows the depth of our capital programme overall, and also Appendix 4. And remember, we only introduced that, I think it's about this time last year, and I thought it was a very good move. And that gives an update and an ongoing update on what are our significant capital projects, where the most used descriptions are, I think, as you'll see from Appendix 4, on track and progressing well. It means, for instance, the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, which has been long delayed, that is now on track and it's making good progress. Perth High School, that's on track and it's making good progress. Destiny Bridge, and I have to confess, I still think of it, the Crosstay Link Road and the CTLR, and I think a number do, but it is the Destiny Bridge, and that is very much on track and making good progress. And probably the one I've got most knowledge of is Perth Museum, and that very much is on track too, and it's making good progress. And indeed, I think it's going to be a great moment for Perth and Kinross when next year at Easter, the doors of the new Perth Museum actually open. And remember, along with the museum, you've also got the Perth Art Gallery and the enhancements and improvements that are going to come there. I actually do think these are all success stories. Projects that are going to enhance Perth and Kinross, improving the quality of life for all of our citizens, and at one and the same time, boosting our local economy and providing growth and advancement. The report also sets out, and not let us overlook, some 92 million of expenditure on the housing investment programme over the next 5 years. Investment that will add to and enhance our existing housing stock. Finally, and not least, I very much would like to thank once again our officers across the council for the sterling efforts to ensure the delivery of this administration's capital programme during what are really times of constraint and times of difficulty. But we do have ambition, and it's to take Perth and Kinross and our community forward, and I move this paper.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I would like to second this report, the support that the whole council is taking forward, and the whole council has had part to play in and take forward. So I think it's not just this administration's capital budget, it's all our capital budget. We've all had a part to play in it. I think we should be proud of what we're trying to do here. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. We're now going to move on to comment, and I'm going to take first of all in the queue is comment about levelling up from Councillor Allen, and then followed by Councillor Rebick. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Earlier on, the leader of the council mentioned that he was going to work with Councillor Duff. We're all disappointed about the lack of levelling up so far. It's quite something that we heard from the Chancellor today, that there's a further £80 million for new levelling up partnerships to fund regeneration projects in Scotland. So let's hope we can actually get our name on the page somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Allen. And yes, we do all want to work together because we do depend, it's important external funding, and that at margin really can make a big difference on quite a lot of things we want to achieve. Councillor Rebick, followed by then Councillor Barrett.
Thanks again, convener. I think it's just in the context of, you quite rightly mentioned some fantastic capital projects that are ongoing, but I also think it's appropriate to acknowledge the nursery builds actually in Rattray, Oak Bank, and the one closest to my heart in Latham. They might not be quite as sexy as some of the big projects that you've mentioned, but they're nonetheless really important and are already making a big difference in the lives of our families. And I think it is important to acknowledge the great work done by our early years teams, both in terms of this administration, but quite rightly, actually, when the last administration as well, under the convenership of Councillor Shires, also to acknowledge the 27 million quid that the Scottish Government put into these projects as well. But most importantly, I think it's right we acknowledge the ongoing work of our staff in our early years centres, whether it's in these new nurseries, our existing school nurseries, our childminders, and indeed our third-party providers. So I appreciate the opportunity just to make that comment. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, and indeed we shouldn't overlook the other projects, the ones set out in Appendix 2, but the big ticket projects, some of those can make a very big difference indeed. Councillor Barrett, and then Deputy Provost Parrott.
Thanks, convener. I think not to have received any levelling up funding in the previous tranche of funding was extremely disappointing, and I think across all parties we took that on the chin and tried to engage positively with the UK government, so that if there was something wrong with the quality of our bids, or we weren't ticking particular funding boxes with the sorts of applications that we were putting forward, we wanted to get the necessary feedback in that in order to devise more successful applications for the future. Now, I think despite considerable efforts from politicians of all parties, we haven't even been able to secure a meeting with Michael Gove or any of the other ministers, despite them being in Scotland on numerous occasions. I thought we were being tipped the wink at the recent event at the Perth Museum and Art Gallery, when Lord Afford started to extol the benefits of UK levelling up funding in Scotland. I thought, well, we must be in with a shout this time round, and it wasn't until the leader of the council pointed out that there hadn't been any levelling up funding given to Perth or Perth and Kinross, and indeed we were the only city in Scotland not to benefit from any funding that he kind of I think acknowledged what the real position was here locally. I was sat next to his private secretary and did say to her that these decisions really chafe with us as a council, and we can't see the transparency in the decisions that are being made, and that we were really disappointed that none of the relevant UK ministers would engage with us. Now she advised that the Scotland office was there to help facilitate those sorts of meetings, and I think we really have to push them, because otherwise the decision on this tranche of funding is an absolute slap in the face to the people of Perth and Kinross, and we should call it out for that.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, and I indeed hear what you're saying. I think the key thing, though, is that we as councillors collectively and together we've got to keep on pushing and pressing and making our case, in particular on Perth West, but on potentially other projects. Can I turn now to Deputy Provost Parrott, and then it will be Provost McDade.
Thank you very much, Convener. It's only a small amount of money in the greater scheme of things, but can I particularly welcome the additional capital grant for the Community Bus Fund at a time when we are seeking to encourage bus use as sustainable transport, at a time when bus use by youngsters who now have the under 22 card is rising strongly. But sadly, since COVID, bus use by those over 60 is still not recovered to pre-COVID levels. I'm sure we can use this money to good effect in improving our bus transport infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I think that's helpful additional funding. Provost McDade.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, I'd just like to actually echo Councillor Rebek's comments earlier on about the value of nurseries and early learning provisions. Yesterday, I visited for the first time the Logie Rate nursery, which was completed during COVID, and this was my first opportunity to actually go and see it, and it has made a huge impact on the school. The school roll is up 50% since the introduction of the nursery, showing the value of having nursery provision in our rural schools. But the life and the activity in the school has grown dramatically, and you can experience that when you walk in the building. And I think absolutely what he said, echoing that the support that he as convener and his predecessor, Councillor Shires, have shown in that area is laudable and must be continued by the council. Just to get parochial for a second, I wanted to talk about that lottery car parking, which is mentioned in the report as one of the projects that currently is not expected to be progressed in this financial year. Councillor Duff and I are hoping to meet with officers in the coming weeks to discuss the situation around this. A number of sites have previously been put forward and knocked back for a variety of reasons. However, we are hopeful a site can be found, and I know there is great desire in the community to see that.
Thank you, Provost. And I see a request for comment from Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Convener. Excuse me. I think this capital paper demonstrates from the comments around the housing ship that even when the market for building houses becomes depressed with cost of inflation, lack of access to materials, that our actual housing team step into the fold and shift the money around and look to increase our availability of housing within Perth and Kinross by increasing the number of buybacks. And I think they need commended for the efforts that they do and all the different things that they try and attempt to do. I think the recent award for the housing of Ukrainian refugees and private accommodation, a process that no other council in Scotland thought of or took action on, I think also demonstrates their flexibility and their enthusiasm for increasing our housing stock and making sure people aren't homeless in Perth and Kinross. The Housing Committee on the 29th of November will have the next version of the SHIP, the 24, 25, 28, 29, and that report does demonstrate how closely we work with our partners to ensure that we maximise the number of house building and the availability of all types of affordable housing within Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. I don't see any further requests for comment. So can we agree the paper and the contents? That's good. Right, just before I hand it back on to the Vice Convener for the Treasury report, can I just make 2 points? One, how much I agree with Councillor Colin Stewart's comments about Appendix 2, because we might sometimes focus a bit too much on Appendix 4, but these are the big projects. Appendix 2 really is, I think, very helpful and split down by service areas. And I think you can find out a lot of things from that appendix. So indeed, thanks to the finance team on that. The other point I'm going to make is we're just after 4:30. Now, we obviously have been impacted today by, understandably, the Scrutiny Committee report earlier on. I don't know if Karen Donaldson, who I think is online, wants to come in. I would very much like to have taken the procurement paper today, but I think we have to first of all take the paper on the Fair Work statement, and secondly, the paper on the Health and Social Care Partnership, because both of these are basically time critical. And the first, it's we don't want to have any impact on the grant award issue as set out in the report. It is time critical. And the Health and Social Care Partnership, I think it's partly for the reasons of advertising positions, but it's also, I think, we want to move towards wrapping up on the leadership review. There's still two strategic lead positions to be filled, but I think this is quite important, and it's about integrating much more the Health and Social Care Partnership into the Council. Now, Karen, I don't know if you want to say a word or so.
No, Convener, thank you. It would just be very much appreciated if these papers could be prioritised today, if you were happy to take the Fair Work statement, Fair Work First statement and the HSCP paper. Thank you.
Can the committee agree? Right, good. I'm now going to hand over to the Vice Convener for the Treasury paper.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Treasury Activity and Compliance Report. I'll ask Stuart Mackenzie to introduce the report.
Thank you, Vice Convener. This report advises the Committee of Treasury Activity during the second quarter of a financial year to the 30th of September. The bank rate increased in August to 5.25% and has remained unchanged, with the next review due on the 14th of December. Inflation has, however, continued to fall, with the latest figures for October, released after this report was finalised, standing at 4.6%, reflecting downward pressure on housing and household services. Movements in Public Works Loans Board rates are shown in Appendix 1. And interest rates for short-term borrowing reduced over the quarter, but increased for longer-term borrowing due to global economic and political factors. Treasury activity during the quarter is summarised in Section 5 and Appendix 2 to the report. There was no new long-term borrowing undertaken during the quarter, and the Council's long-term debt remained at £598 million. One short-term market loan for £5 million was undertaken to manage cash flow, which was repaid during the quarter. The average return on the Council's investments increased from 4.5% to 5.34%, in line with interest rates. However, investment tended to be for shorter periods, as funds are required to support the capital budget. Total income generated in investment activity during the quarter will total approximately £1.4 million on maturity. And as detailed in Section 6, the committee is requested to approve an amendment to the Council's investment policy to permit £20 million or 20% of the portfolio to be held in an individual money market fund. And this change is requested to allow more flexibility in investing short term, which is increasingly the case given the cash flow requirements of the capital programme. And to reassure the committee, the money market funds used by the Council are trebly rated, so there is no increase in investment risk arising from this change. As reported previously, the overall amounts available for the Council to invest continue to reduce as funds are applied to delivering the capital budget. The total amount of investments outstanding at the end of September was just over £133 million, a reduction of £20.9 million on the position at the end of June. There were no breaches in compliance with Treasury and investment policy, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
I don't see any. Oh, there is a question. There's a question from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Vice Convener. A year ago, I questioned whether it was necessary for us to be receiving quarterly Treasury activity and compliance reports, and it was agreed that we would continue to do that. Back then. However, we've now had another year, another set of 4 quarterly activity and compliance reports with no breaches of compliance for the Council's approved Treasury Management Policy Statement, no breaches of Treasury Management practices, and no breaches of our lending limits. And that continues the long history of similar such reports to this committee. So I wanted to ask officers if there was a risk or a downside or anything prohibiting us moving to a 6-monthly reporting cycle, and if not, Vice Convener, I wondered whether now would be the opportune moment to be moving to such a cycle in the interests of efficiency and reducing the number of reports that committees receive simply for noting.
Stuart, just to answer the question on the if we were to go to elected member briefings every 3 months, twice biannually and biannually to have meetings, reports at committee meeting.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm quite happy to take the question. And Councillor Barrett, I do recall your comment at the time. So what we do is we comply with the CITFA Code of Practice and Treasury Management in the Public Services 2021 Code. And the minimum reporting requirement as set out in the code is every 6 months. So the key thing for me as a Section 85 officer is that the strategy, the direction of travel is set by full council. That's also determined in setting a capital budget to a large extent. So in terms of moving to 6-monthly reporting, that doesn't breach the code.
After hearing that response and the commitment that we could have elected member briefings between the 2 meetings, I think it's a sensible use of officer time, committee services time, and our own time. So I'd be happy to incorporate that into the moving of the report. Thank you. And I'll ask if my vice convener would be happy. My convener would be happy, actually.
Yes, I think the key thing is that if it is 6 monthly and that's in line with CITFA guidance, and we must never, be able to match that, and we maintain really high standards, and we've got to accord with that. But I think the key thing is that in between there are elected member briefings, so that all members of the council, and in particular with the budget process coming up, you can understand the trajectory of our finances, and Treasury really is a crucial part. And the 6 monthly papers do kind of link up in many ways the revenue and the capital papers. But I'm quite happy to go with this proposal and to accept it, and it is in line with CITFA guidance.
Thanks very much, Convener.
Thanks. The only thing I would say that is if there was a breach of compliance of that would come out. I don't expect there ever will be, but if there's a critical evidence we need to get, that can be given out to members of the committee by exception. Councillor Parrott. Oh, sorry, Deputy Provost Parrott. Sorry.
The proposed amendment to the investment policy is predicated around meeting cash flow requirements, but could this increase to the ability to borrow for shorter durations be of assistance in reducing a requirement for longer term borrowing that may be at higher interest rates than we would want to pay, and with the prospect of longer term interest rates coming down in the medium term future? Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We just had that. We had a very similar discussion with our Treasury consultants last week, or the week before, around that. What we're seeing is that PWLB rates for short-term borrowing have been reducing, and for longer-term borrowing have been increasing. That's steadied a little bit, but in terms of our borrowing requirements, around £192 million next year. So we will need to borrow an awful lot of money as an organisation. And one way of managing that and avoiding perhaps some of the rates that we're currently seeing would be to borrow shorter term. That gives us a degree of certainty, and then to review that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time as those loans begin to mature. So we've always got the opportunity of going for shorter term borrowing to give us some degree of surety over our costs, but also allow time for the market perhaps to settle to a more normal position than we're currently seeing at the moment. So very much in line with what you suggested.
Thank you. I see no other questions, so I will move the report. Councillors, this Treasury update covers the period of the 1st of July through to the 30th of September 2023. The Head of Finance has already provided us with a comprehensive update on the contents of the report. The report provides commentary on the wider economy as well as a summary of our own Treasury activity. Section 5 provides us with an update on the excellent investment returns that we continue to enjoy. Section 6, we are asked to amend our investment policy by increasing the limit for money market funds to 10% or £10 million of the total investment portfolio. This is a sensible approach that will provide more flexibility to our Treasury management team and hopefully allow them to keep generating good investment returns that benefit the whole council. I am also delighted to note that there were no breaches in compliance with the investment strategy and policies. The Council's prudential indicators were adhered to throughout the quarter and the Council's plans remain prudent, affordable and sustainable. I'm happy to move the report with and to take on board the sensible suggestion from Councillor Barrett. Elected members will be kept up to date through elected member briefings, and anything out of the ordinary should be brought back to the committee. Happy to move this report.
Happy to second.
Thank you. I do have a comment here now from Provost McDade. Xander.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think it's just important to note for the committee's recollection that the council agreed back in June, I think it was, that we would no longer have the annual Treasury Reporters Council on the grounds that the Finance and Resources Committee were monitoring it quarterly. Now, I'm happy to go along with 6 monthly as long as that isn't out with SIPFA guidance as we've been indicated, and that anything out with compliance would be reported immediately. But I think it's just important for members to note that this is a further reduction this year in our Treasury reporting. So just for members' awareness of that point.
Thank you. As there are no other comments, can we agree the paper with the amendment?
Thank you, Vice Convener. As I indicated earlier, we're now 5:15. We've agreed to take the Fair Work paper and it's going to be Pauline Johnson, and then Jackie Pepper with the Health and Social Care Partnership paper. It's been a long day. What I'm now going to propose, I want to apologise actually to Lindsay Stewart and Vanessa Robertson because they've been waiting. What I think would be preferable is the paper on procurement we take in its own right. There are some available slots over the next 2 weeks on Mondays and Wednesdays. I've identified 3 possible dates, and we take that paper, we defer it to a special meeting of Finance and Resources, rather than trying to rush through it, or even until January. Are members in agreement? Okay, that being the case, then I want us to move to the Fair Work paper, and Pauline Johnson is Pauline, to introduce it.
Thank you. The Fair Work First is the Scottish Government flagship for driving high quality, fair work and workforce diversity across Scotland. And the Council has committed to Fair Work principles going back to 2016. There have been some recent changes to the Fair Work, and it's now called Fair Work First, made by Scottish Government earlier in the summer period. There have also added 2 further criteria to the 5 that was previously indicated, and there are now further requirements in relation to grant funding and grant processing, and a requirement to publish a Fair Work statement on our website to indicate that the Council is committed to advancing fair work as an employer in this area. We're also asking the committee to consider paying at least the real living wage to all apprentices and trainees from the 1st of April 2024, and offering flexible working for all employees from day 1 of employment as set out in the paper. We have been continuing to discuss the Fair Work statement that's Appendix 1 with the trade unions, but this is in a draft forum as these conversations are continuing. But in order to not delay any grant funding applications, we're suggesting that this is posted on our website and that we continue to advance Fair Work First as an employer.
Okay, do we have any questions? And I can see that there is one from Bailey. Alistair.
Thank you, Convener. Obviously, very, very warmly welcome this paper and the proposals within it. If I'd known that there was this wee group who are the modern apprentices who aren't getting the living wage, I'd have proposed that earlier. So that's good that that's coming to light. My question, though, is about the term fire and rehire. I know it's a fairly recent term, but I wondered whether officers can comment on whether the council have ever in the past done anything that might now be construed as fire and rehire, because it's good that we're saying we won't do it in future, but just interesting to know whether we've ever done anything of that ilk in the past or required that an ALIO or other body does similar. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Pauline, can I come to you first on hire and refire, fire and rehire, and any other officers who want to comment?
That is not a practice that we deploy as a council, neither have done nor will we intend to in future. And if you can look at the statement, it's very clear the processes that we go through in terms of engaging with our trade unions and employees to consult on any changes that are being implemented. And only as a last resort would we get involved in actually serving notice. But we've got good relations and that's not where we are to our business.
Great, that's music to my ears. Thank you.
Pauline, thanks. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. Once again, this is probably down to my naivety. At 5.3, it suggests that we've got 31 apprentices. Sorry, that's at 5.4. It suggests we've got 31 apprentices and trainees. And at 5.3, it suggests that it's going to cost approximately £330,000. That's £10,000 per post. Have I got that right?
At the moment, we're a living wage employer, but we also pay the training rates as a living wage accredited employer. That means that they're on training rates at 16 and 17-year-olds because they're exempt from the real living wage allowance. So yes, the rates that they are paid is £5.60 and it will go up to £12 an hour.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to move this paper. I'm delighted to so do. And it's about the implementation of the revised Fair Work First criteria. Perth and Kinross Council has a history on this whole front. We committed to the original Fair Work criteria back in 2016 to ensure that our employment practice met the principles of fair work. And indeed, our chief executive at that time, Bernadette Malone, was very much involved at a national level on this whole approach. By continuing to support Fair Work First, the council, as an employer, I think is demonstrating to its customers, to its clients, to its users of our services, and also to existing and future employees, how we embed fair work practices into our employment offering. Access to fair work really is a crucial, critical component of individual, community and society well-being. There's also an economic and business imperative to Fair Work, because it can contribute to increased workforce commitment and morale, lower rates of absenteeism, more effective recruitment, lower staff turnover, and also improve productivity and other aspects of performance. Signing up to Fair Work First recognises the value the Council places on these principles. The criteria has been revised and renamed as Fair Work First. The Scottish Government requirements for organisations seeking and awarding public sector grants, contracts and other funding have also been updated to include a commitment to advancing the revised Fair Work criteria. This paper proposes 1. The publishing of a statement of our commitment to advancing the Fair Work First criteria, and secondly, action to support one of the revised criteria through the implementation of the payment of the real living wage to our trainees and our apprentices. In taking these steps, we commit that we will continue with our employees, their trade union representatives, suppliers and funding bodies to ensure that the criteria are reflected in our employment, procurement and funding processes. I think it's an important paper and I'm more than happy to move it.
Very happy to second it, this paper, and second it. I'd like to thank the Pauline and her team who've brought this forward. This is what every one of us sitting here want to do, is to support this paper and support the most important part of this council. Not necessarily senior officers, definitely not elected members, but certainly the frontline staff and staff who deliver daily what we try to set them out to do. And I think it's exactly what every elected member and officer would want to do. And I can't say any more that this encapsulates what we should be doing for our staff, which are the most important part of this organisation. Thanks.
Are there any comments? Yes, Deputy Provost Park.
Thank you very much. Apart from supporting this paper on its merits and for all the reasons that the convener has just set out, I think it's important that we realise that we live in an age of an ageing population where the working age population is a smaller percentage of the total. And in order to meet all of the requirements that we have for employment, it's important that we make employment as flexible as possible for the workforce that we have. So for that reason too, I strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and I think you make a very germane point. Any further comments? Can we agree the paper? Right, and there I'm pleased about that. We move then on to our final paper of today, and that is and it's a crucial part and towards the end of the leadership review, and it's on the Health and Social Care Partnership. I think in part it's about how we integrate more of into the workings of the council. But to introduce the paper, I'm going to ask Jackie Pepper to speak to it. Jackie, are you online?
Thank you, convener. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, convener. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Thank you. Thank you very much, convener, and thanks for your introduction. I'm very pleased to say a few words on this report, which, as you've indicated, is about the review of the senior leadership team for health and social care.
Jackie, sorry. You know the tuba that I've talked to you about that you've been playing in the background, and then I thought it was maybe whale song, but that's really all we're hearing at the moment. So can you get IT to get another computer quickly?
They came to fix it yesterday, but obviously it's not worked.
That actually sounds better now.
Yeah, Jackie.
Okay. just the mention of IT and getting it fixed made it better. So thank you very much, Councillor Ling. I was saying that I'm pleased to say a few words from this report, which is about the review of the senior leadership team for health and social care. And you'll see in this report that the new structure I've brought forward is designed to better support integration of the leadership and management of the wide range of health and social care services that are delivered via the Health and Social Care Partnership. The IGB at its inception in 2016 brought together responsibility for strategic planning in an integrated way for health and social care and for those services that are delegated to it under the integration scheme. But it's only now and for the first time that there'll be a move away from a professional or more siloed management within the Health and Social Care Partnership and introduce a structure that brings together responsibilities for both health services and social work and social care services under the same management and leadership. Integrated portfolios of services around the needs of our older population and our adult population are created within this structure. So, for example, the head of integrated health and care for older people will lead and be responsible for the delivery of all inpatient and healthcare services for older people. That includes the wards that we run in Perth Royal Infirmary and in our 4 community hospitals, community health and nursing services and allied health professions, as well as social care, which covers care at home and care homes. And that's designed to strengthen leadership and an emphasis on our whole system approach here, because we know what we do in the community or what we don't do in the community has an impact on the hospital system and vice versa. So I recognise that while a great deal has already been achieved, the views of our staff, as well as the people we serve, tell us that they seek even greater integration of services with more person-centred experiences of health and care based on what matters to them. So the proposals in this paper affect Health and Social Care Partnership staff who are employed by either the Perth and Kinross Council or NHS Tayside. And as such, the proposals are developed jointly with staff and trade unions with advice from HR representing both of those employers. We have approximately 2,000 staff directly employed in the health and social care, and the total budget is 280 million currently. So there are 3 new posts in the integrated senior leadership structure, which must be evaluated by both Council and NHS Tayside to apply the appropriate salary grades. And a joint recruitment and appointment process must also apply, and workforce change processes of both employers must also be taken into account. All of that is complete for the Chief Finance Officer stroke Head of Governance and Performance post, and the Perth and Kinross IGB will be asked to approve the appointment process for this role to be taken forward as soon as possible following the IGB meeting on the 29th of November, which is next week. For the Council, the new posts of Heads of Integrated Health and Care, that's 2 posts, are graded by the Council at the same salary level as 7 of the strategic lead positions that have recently been recruited within the Council. And the grading of NHS Tayside is pending, and as soon as we receive that, we'll move into the recruitment process for those 2 roles. There are no direct financial implications for either the Council or NHS Tayside or indeed the IGB arising from this, as the staffing costs are managed via an integrated budget and the gradings are in line with existing budgets within the partnership. So these new arrangements will provide certainty to staff and partners, as there has been interim arrangements in place for some time and perhaps too long in some cases. So they also will provide a solid foundation for further integration of functional activities as the partnership delivered a programme of transformation to address demand pressures and implements a revised strategic commissioning plan, which the IGB will be approving early in 2024, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Conveners, thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Just say to members of the committee, I very much regret the sound issues there. but I thought it was important that we persist. And I think it's important we look at this report and hopefully agree it today. Are there any questions? Thomas, I think you want to comment.
Yes, if I could just.
I'll move the report in a minute.
Thank you, convener. Firstly, my apologies. I think the whale music pushed a couple of us over the edge at this end, because it's been a very long and very sobering day, and I think just to have a bit of brevity at the end of that was helpful, but perhaps not appropriate. So apologies. But I do think this is an exceptionally important report for us as a leadership team, just in terms of continuing and bringing towards a conclusion the stage of the leadership review that we are implementing just now. And I just would like to kind of thank Jackie for the work that her and her team have done, supported by colleagues from across the council, particularly Karen Donaldson, in terms of with the job evaluation, because this is the model that we want to be developing, where we have better integrated services and look to change that balance of care. And this does allow us to begin to do that better than we have to date. So I'm really supportive of the work that Jackie and the team have done.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move this report. And I'm pleased to do so. It completes the review of the senior leadership in the council, and it dealing obviously specifically with the Health and Social Care Partnership. These new integrated leadership roles are designed to better support the integration of health and social care services across Perth and Kinross. These leadership roles are critical in terms of delivering on many of the Council's corporate priorities, as well as the strategic commissioning plan for the partnership. Implementing these new arrangements will bring an end the temporary arrangements which have been in place over the last few years. These will be joint appointments whereby the Council and NHS Tayside work together, having regard to their respective employment policies and procedures, terms and conditions, trade union and staff side arrangements. I am pleased to support the creation of these new leadership roles and the implementation of the new arrangements. And I think too much in the past, the IJB has been at one remove almost from the council. I think it's about bringing it more into, I suppose you might call the body of the cart, but bringing it more aligned with the council. So I'm happy to move this report.
Yes, thanks for the report, Jackie. It is an important report, and it deserves to be well read and understood by all the elected members. It has been at the end of a long day, but anybody who knows Jackie Pepper and her team will know the commitment that they give to the work they carry out on our behalf. And Jackie was one of the most accessible and knowledgeable officers, and I think that I'd like to thank her for doing this, for bringing this report, and I'm really happy to second it. You did take me back to my youth a little bit there, Jackie, with the music. Do you remember the clangers and the soup dragon? Because that was what I was beginning to remind me by the end of it. But no, happy to second this report.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Do we have any comments from anyone? Can we agree the paper and approve it? Right, and thank you for your patience, and that concludes the meeting. And obviously, I'm conscious of the procurement paper, and we will turn to that again in due course. Okay, thanks.